Hey, Andrew. Don't mind me, I'm just sitting here listening to some music. Alright, let's get started. Got everything set up here. It just takes a couple minutes after going live to get everything finally set up. So I've just let myself listen to some music in the background. Alright, just me tonight. Partly because I am smoked and I have very little energy. I would be a very poor host for a guest tonight. Actually, let me take this hood off. So we're going to have a shorter than usual live stream tonight. And I also wanted to take a little bit of time to just talk about From the Static. So there's a lot of asks for feedback, and we tried to answer as many of those as possible. Of course, can never keep up with all of them. So part of the goal here with this live stream is to talk about From the Static as if, the selected work, the whole process, which we've talked about a bit in the Bard blog, so I'm not going to belabor that. Talk about some of the interesting things that we learned as a publisher from that whole process, and talk a little bit about pitching two anthologies, just since we can't give feedback on every single one of the pitches. I thought it would be helpful to at least go on the live stream and give some general feedback, good things to do, things to not do, what makes a strong packet, what's going to get more attention from someone reviewing it, things like that. But very first, I just want to say, if I'm looking exhausted, I am. A lot of Band of Bards fans probably have seen some of my own personal tweets. I'm a volunteer firefighter in town, and we had some really bad flooding last night. I'm on the water rescue team, so we were called up about 8:30 last night, and I got home around 2 a.m. After going through some different neighborhoods, like house to house. We were all going, checking on folks who needed to be evacuated, not the extreme, the creek waters and stuff have flooded into the streets, about up to my waist at different parts, which, I'm 5'4", so my, up to my waist is up to other people's knees, but it was pretty nasty stuff last night, and it was certainly a workout just to walking through all the water. So excuse me if I am not my usual perky self tonight. All right, so that's out of the way. Let's get right into From the Static. Very first thing, hello to everybody that just came in while I was rambling. I see Dan is here, like always. Thank you for always tuning in. Chris is in the chat, so that's good, because when I drag, Chris can chime in the chat. And yes, I do have a little bit of coffee this late at night and a delicious apple fritter. So, From the Static. Alright, if anybody has not yet seen our Bard blog that announced the final selections for the anthology, I'm just going to quickly run down the titles and the teams. We will eventually have individual live streams dedicated to each of these titles as we approach the eventual crowdfunding campaign for the anthology. So lots more detail will come out on each of these stories at a later date. Tonight, though, we've got The Cauldron, written by C.J. Hudson. Art is by Elie Gonzalez, and it's a letter by Corey Breen. That one's going to be neat. CJ sent a couple of really impressive pitches to us, and this is neat. The Cauldron, really fun art. Kind of it's a horror anthology, right? But like the story itself is kind of cute. But really neat stuff. I'm excited for that. Beholden, written by Brent Fisher, illustrated by Italian artist Maria Teresa Siska. That's going to be fantastic. I'm a huge fan of Brent's, and they just pack so much story into every script, regardless of how short or long it may be. I can't wait to see what that one looks like when it's all finished up. Embrace Me is a solo work by Rio Burton, which, just to toot a little bit of horns here, if you haven't seen Rio's other solo works, this is fantastic here. The branches Entwined and Broken by Rio Burton. Recent Kickstarter. It was just, here's a great page from it. This is really cool. The little charm here came actually as a little merchandise item, extra reward in there, and that's really pretty. So Rio just does fantastic work. I'm so excited to have her as part of the anthology. Next up is Gravestone Tree by E.C. Ibis. This one's really going to be neat. The art in particular on this one caught my attention because it does stand out as a very different style compared to every other story that we picked. So really cool. Very fortunate that we were able to create an anthology with so many different styles that still all come together under that umbrella of horror. And yeah, very cool. Again, next up, and I have to tease it a little bit. From the man who brought you Ultramax, Mr. Doug Wood, comics fan, comics reader, Doug Wood. The story is called How the Devil Gets You. And if you haven't picked up, it's written by Doug Wood. Art by Federica Manson, colors by Marty Gassi, and a letter by Tobin Rasico. Very fantastic team. Always good when you have at least one of the Rasicos, if not both, involved in your project. They're fantastic. The Infant is written by Wells Thompson with art by Rachel Allen Everett, and it's a letter by Nathan Kemp. Fantastic team. Wells joined us for a Super Bowl Sunday special Bardcast, which you can catch that if you're following along on Twitch or YouTube, and you definitely should be. YouTube will hold all of our past Bardcasts, whereas Twitch will eventually time them out. It only holds for so many days, so you can always catch up through those two channels there, and definitely check in on that last Bardcast with Wells Thompson, because really great conversation. She Who Weeps, written by avid fan of Mexicans with Swords, Mr. Jared Lujan, illustrated by Marcus Jimenez, and lettered by Buddy Bedouin. I don't know if I can hold my excitement on that. The story is about La Leona. It delves into a little bit more of Mexican folklore, and I know I said I wasn't going to talk too much about each of these individually, but how can you not talk about a comic from Jared and Marcus? It's gonna be awesome. Bangers only. Am I really 37? So, post-traumatic credit scene, written by Mike Gibson and illustrated and lettered by Riley McFarlane. They both teamed up on The Amazing Shakes. that one's going to be exciting. The Glow Up by Melissa White. Fantastic comic creator. Art and coloring is from Val Halvorsen of Finger Guns. Don't know how that happened to us, but it did. Lettered by Rob Jones and editor Emmett Nahil. That's a super team right there. Holy cow. I don't know how we got that lucky, but we did. I'll take it. The longest of all of our titles. The Unfortunate Consequences of Being a Time Traveler. Written by Jimmy Gasparo, who is no fan of brevity. And arts by Sam Owen. Also lettered by Mika Myers. Whew. Again, these are just amazing comics creators that have teamed up. Next is Pearl Diving, a solo work by Alina Wahab, who, I left it down there. She had a story in Nectar, a trans femme anthology, which it's down there in my piles, and I'm tethered to these. But I read through that story, which is really neat to be able to have, some prior works of somebody who's submitted to our anthology, to be able to go back and look at something else of theirs that had been published in another anthology. That was really cool. And to see what Alina put together for Nectar, super impressive. The Pearl Diving is going to be a lovely story. A Little Piece of Me, written by Justin Ryan and lettered by DC Hopkins, which is cool. Justin's story is very gory. If you don't get scared by A Little Piece of Me, or you have no emotions. The most unique title we saw by far, New V to You. It's written NU-V and then in parentheses the number 2 and the letter U. So I might be pronouncing or saying the title wrong for all I know. Aaron Keepers, the writer, can absolutely correct me. And it's illustrated by Fenn Hamilton. Really impressive team there. Pretty interesting story. So be neat to be able to dive into every one of these individually on their own at later casts. But man, I just get excited looking back at them. The Angler, written by Rob Pilkington and art by JJ Lopez. Really neat. If you can't tell from the title, it's going to deal with some deep sea situations, and I don't know if there's anything that's more consistently terrifying than being in deep water, right? You think of like movies like The Abyss or The Sphere, and you're just down there on the bottom of the ocean, so isolated, so far away from anything that can help you. I'm scared. I'm going to move on. Memoirs of a Ghost Hunter, written by Alyssa Glouff, and her fiance Patrick Sinat is the artist behind that story, which is really neat to have them together as a team. Really, obviously it's just like every other one of these stories. It's a horror themed story, but it's also kind of like a touching story. Got me in the old black heart that I have. And last but certainly not least, The Bodega, written by Sarah Harding and illustrated by Matt Harding. So neat to have a husband-wife team too. Yeah, so cool. So those in entirety are the lineup for From the Static, and that probably took me way too long to go through. But one of the neat things here, and I'm skipping a little bit ahead of my list of notes. I did keep a little bit of a notepad here to keep myself on track. We've got a fairly nice list. We can start calling it an overflow list. So let me take you through our selection process and really briefly recap how that all worked. Right. So for anybody who wasn't following, we had nearly 200 submissions to this, which blew us both away. We never in a million years would have thought that we would get 200 submissions to anything, let alone our very first anthology. So what we had to do here was create a very fair and objective way to sift through all these, right? We obviously recognize a lot of the names attached to these, to the pitches. We didn't want to just pick all the folks that we like. That wouldn't be fair, and it wouldn't be right to all the people who put a lot of hard work into their pitches. So we decided on, and I had to pull it back up, right? We had, I think, like 3 different cuts that we did. So we designed some different like objective and subjective metrics to either basically yes or no on, like, does this story or team support the Band of Bards mission of helping to advance representation, inclusivity, and diversity within comics. We got to hit that mission. That is the whole sole reason that Band of Bards exists, is to advance those goals. So that obviously is something that needs to be supported by anything that we're going to publish. Looked at different things like the size of the teams. Want to balance all that out. Make sure you're not diluting things too much by having so many people involved that nobody benefits very much from it. That's not fair. And we took some subjective measures, right? Like, we just kept it simple. Our overall impression of the pitch, strength of the story, and the quality of the art. And we just, 1 through 5, grade them. Higher grades, better. That gave us like a kind of first cutoff line of anybody who scored under a certain, I think we said if you anything under 12, we're just cutting that. Then to give some greater separation, we decided out of those 3 categories, how would we rank those from most important to least important? And then we assigned a weight to each of them. And so anybody unfamiliar with how that works, the weight, say a weight of 1 is essentially like a neutral position, right? So a weight of 2, you would then multiply the raw score by 2, so forth. That allowed us to then take something that may have been all equal raw scores and give them some separation by having the weights there. So that way we understood a pitch that had a higher grade quality to us for more important categories would stand out compared to others, all of everything else being equal. So that allowed us to more or less give as fair a shake as we could to all of these and get to a better cutoff. But again, we still had to make a lot of really difficult cuts. There were certainly enough stories in here to make several anthologies over. So we ended up with our 16 stories, and we still had a whole bunch left over that we really wanted to do. And we just sat and we figured, let's, it sucks to be able to, to have to say we can't do it. We love it, your pitch, but we just can't do this. So let's try to figure out how we can do some of these as like individual one-shots. See what else can develop. If we make that offer, would that be palatable to the creative team? So we reached out to about, off the top of my head, a couple dozen, and for the most part, people were really receptive of that. So can't really announce any of those just yet. Over the next few months, I'll be spending time speaking one-on-one with each of those folks. It's to kind of flesh out their stories and then get a deal memo signed, and at that point we'd be able to make some official announcements. But those will all be for stories in 2023 and 2024. So out of this individual process, we've got from the static, a title that we didn't originally plan for 2022. It just worked out very well that people really wanted to do this, so we did it. And then we've somehow managed to fill out a lot of our publishing schedule for 2023 and 2024. Somehow, before Band of Bards is even a year old, we have like 3 full years worth of publishing. I'm blown away by that. That's completely, not to sell short what Chris and I have done, but that is in no small part due to the comics community, the amazing support that you have all given to us. Everybody taking a little bit of a leap of faith and giving us a benefit of the doubt long enough for us to kind of start to prove ourselves through our actions. Because, we've seen time and time again, every single week, it seems like in comics, there's someone out there being proven somewhat hypocritical or to just not really care that much about comics as much as, their bottom line. So, that's very gracious of so many people to give us that chance. Thank you. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. And for Chris, I would have never in a million years expected such a great success, from our first anthology, and we haven't even really gotten to the nuts and bolts of getting it made. Yeah, just really overwhelming. So we did have a little bit of an email goof up. That was all on me. An initial rejection letter was sent out to a lot of people who weren't supposed to get it. That was a copy and paste error on my fault. Very simple and stupid thing, but that's all that was, and unfortunately caused a lot of confusion. A lot of folks who, Dan, a little goof up. So, I had a bunch of hidden cells on a spreadsheet that I didn't realize got copied along with all the non-hidden cells. And that formed the initial email list. Ugh. So that's what happened there. That most people were pretty understanding and gracious with that. So I got lucky, I guess, with that, because I certainly expect a lot of angry people. So that's more or less what I had to talk about in my notes, at least. Chris, you can always chime in. Look at him. Moderating, hosting, doing it all tonight. Oh, see? Staying on message. I like it. Excuse me. Keen eye from Chris. Yeah. We did have a special guest tonight. Mr. Bob Ross came down from my bookshelf. Alright, so that's the quick get down and dirty on From the Static. Again, if anybody has questions, please feel free to throw them out there. So I'm not just talking about and I talk about targets. I've got it on the list. Don't worry. Next thing though, pitching to anthologies. All right, we've promised some quick feedback for the folks who wanted to know how they could improve their pitches for anthologies in the future. So quickly, we asked for a lot of basic information. Obviously, like, tell us a little bit about yourself, tell us about your team. We had a plot summary section that had like an upwards limit of 300 words, and then another field where you could that just said like anything else you want us to know, and you could attach I think up to 5 documents that had like obviously an overall max file size limitation, and I mean that's you got to kind of put some of those limits on there just to keep it from overflowing so big. Basic stuff. We didn't want to go out there and reinvent the wheel, and we didn't need to make this super complex. We wanted to make it easy for people to send in a pitch to us for this, partly because we were sitting here thinking, man, I hope we get like 20 pitches. Never imagined, like I said, that we'd have so many. But also, like, I do feel that like you should set the barrier kind of low for submitting a pitch to something like an anthology, especially someone's first anthology. We didn't want to ask for completely finished works, although we did get some, which was neat. We didn't want to demand a whole lot up front. So that certainly helped, I think, a lot more people get a pitch in, but then you also then have a very wide range of levels of completeness and levels of thoroughness in the pitch. So maybe that's something that we could improve on as a publisher, and a good reason to put a little bit more of a higher requirement for your overall pitch, partly so that people aren't sending in a pitch and there's so little to it that there's just no chance of that pitch competing against others that are either finished products or have a bunch more material sent in, rather than just like a quick couple lines about an overall idea of what the story would be. That being said, take a look at the requirements that the publisher is setting out there for the anthology, right? And look at how much time you've got. Obviously time's always, we never have as much time as we want. But if you can put more effort or work into your pitch before the deadline, take that time. There's no reason that you need to rush to submit it. Like, getting it a pitch in first isn't going to like really get you at the head of the line and set yourself apart from others. Take that time, refine the pitch, think it over. If you have, like I said, our plot summary, we gave 300 words, and some folks sent like 20 words about the overall plot. Use that space. If someone's going to give you that 300 words, use that space. Make it meaningful. Don't just fill it to fill it. But you got that space, use it effectively. If you have any sort of sketch art, hey Matt, if you have any kind of sketches, anything at all to attach, we did get some that were sketch pads taken with the camera on the phone. There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, it's not going to look as good as other like completely finished pages and panels, but it is a lot better than sending nothing, right? So nothing wrong with that at all. If it's something that's going to at least show, give a little bit more indication of what your vision is in your head, and show a little bit of your artist's process, hey, that's something, right? Send it. We got some that had some weird extra additional details added in about like what people were doing at the time of writing. We had one of them that got selected said, please select my pitch, otherwise I'll say the F word. I forget whose that was. That was kind of funny. Again, use a space given to you to add in any kind of details, something funny to stand out, whatever. Obviously, with the selection process that we created, just because somebody catches our eye with something quirky, they weren't getting selected just because of that. But think about what that publisher is giving you in terms of your, the space to sell your idea, and use it up as much as you possibly can. The other thing I would say too is that if you were kind of caught unprepared, or you didn't have something like cut and ready to go, you weren't expecting to have, that you were going to have an anthology to be pitching to, and you just put something together really quickly, just because that doesn't get picked up doesn't mean that it's not a bad idea, right? It just means that it didn't have enough to be selected against the other pitches sent in. So continue to refine that story. Continue to refine your pitch. I think I did say to a couple people in emails that, again, going back to our plot summary there of that, having that 300 word maximum, you might have another anthology that you want to pitch to that has, say, like 100 or 200 words max, or maybe 50. Take your pitch, have just a Word doc going where you have plot summaries of varying word lengths, so that you've just got it there, copy and paste into that submission form, and you've got, so that you don't have to rethink of it on the fly because, you had one prepared for 300 words and now you only get 100 words to explain your plot. Just have that pre-done. Have faith in your story, continue to refine it. Obviously getting, if you're not the artist, getting art done for it is not always the easiest thing. If someone's going, if you have to pay for that out of pocket, that's not simple. It's not easy, and it's not fair for a publisher to always expect something like that, which is why, we try to not do it. Right? Matt here, perfect point in case, having his pitches always have smart and thumbnails. That's fine. It doesn't need to be completed pages. Something like that's going to show us or any other publisher the process, and the process is almost more important than the finished product, right? Because the process will give somebody an idea of the story coming together, and if you have a portfolio of past works, well, we can go and look at that to see what your finished product is going to be like, what kind of quality that is. See, I like Dan's take on it too, right? You are sending in a proof of concept. It doesn't necessarily need to be a finished work. And again, if you've got a story that you've had sitting around that you've been working on gradually like that for years and years, well, eventually it gets to the point where it's a finished work, and you can always send that in, or you can end up deciding to self-publish it somehow. Like, there's a lot of neat benefits to pitching to anthologies because it's just continuing to, with less effort than a full comic, you're continuing to refine your own storytelling craft, your own pitching skills, your artistic skills, whatever. Ooh, see? And Rob actually had a longer plot summary. So there you go. Having all that stuff kind of prepared ahead of time, it's just going to make the whole pitching process a bit easier, less stressful for you. Yeah. So am I. That's why I've been talking and rambling for so long like this. No guest, and I can still just continue to talk and talk and talk. Yeah, so there's a lot of different things that can make for a strong packet. Every publisher is going to have different criteria. Everybody's going to have a different opinion, right? Somebody might think that the story itself is the most important thing rather than the art or the overall impression or whatever. Yeah, don't stress out too much, because part of that is a little bit of a game, and that you can't anticipate what someone else is going to be thinking unless it's very, very cut and dry on the submission page. These are the things we're grading. This is how we're doing it. Obviously, like I said, this is our first, so we had to kind of think of that up on the fly a little bit, and we tried to put as much detail on the submission page as we could. But everything's a work in progress when you're a brand new publisher. Yeah. Matt's point is well made. And there's different skills in telling short stories versus a longer story, something full length. What can you tell in 6 pages, 10 pages? What can you tell in a single page comic? Those are all very different skills to be able to put a full, essentially like a full story into whatever length that is. There's different pacing. attributes you need to consider. How do you build a plot over a single page versus a 60-page novella? Some people are really good at one and could never do the other. So, yeah, anthologies are neat. They can be hell on someone's confidence, because you can just never know exactly what someone's going to want with it. So, have confidence in your story. Continue to refine it, and just keep pitching it. That's about all I can say on that, right? Until I start to be super redundant. Told you it was going to be a quick Bardcast. Alright. Last thing on my list. Excuse me. I got to move around a whole bunch. Definitely got the sore back today. Before we get into the very last topic on my list, I think it's a good time for a pastry break. Excuse me. No licking microphones ASMR here. Just fatty cakes. Elise has a very good question, to which I do not have a very good answer. We have talked a lot about whether or not we want to make this an annual thing that we do, if we want to do more frequent anthologies, because they were so much fun. Whether we want to have like an annual, just one single annual anthology, and kind of like rotate the themes and genres. So I think we would very much like to at least do one anthology every year, because this was, for one thing, it's a very fun process, a very fun and interactive thing to do. And we can continue to improve it over and over. So I'm fairly confident there's going to be more anthologies, and we just have to kind of think about how we want that to coalesce and form. No, Dan, it's not Tim Hortons. I went to a local market here in town. So, but it is a delicious apple fritter. I don't know what that is. I think it's somebody eating a cookie. Matt, I used to practice yoga very, very frequently. I was very disciplined on it, and a few years ago when we moved, I just haven't found another yoga studio I really liked, another instructor I liked. So I should just do it at home. Definitely, certainly have a space. It's always one of those things that I keep telling myself, you need to do it, you need to do it. But I'll always advocate yoga. Anybody who's never done it, it's not just, the deep stretch in itself is fantastic, but oh my gosh, if you don't think that it's a workout, yoga is essentially a whole slew of body weight resistance exercises intermixed with deep stretching, and my God, is it great. I need to make the space to take care of myself better. That's interesting, right? I've certainly seen a good share of anthologies going crowdfunding routes. Doug Wood. Doug Wood's done great things with Project Big Hype. I think they're putting Volume 2 together right now and looking at Volume 3. I've got a whole bunch of anthologies sitting down here. By Visibility did fantastic. Nectar did great. I think Comrade Himbo was an anthology, if I'm not mistaken, and that one kicked ass. Rob's in Volume 2. Part of the strength of an anthology, and one of the things Chris and I think makes an anthology a great thing to put onto crowdfunding, is that you've got so many people involved. So you are, in effect, massing together all these followings, right? Fan bases from this creator are now paying attention to something that they're involved in with another creator. Obviously, we're hoping that this brings some more eyes onto Band of Bards. And that kind of gets into our motivation for doing the anthology too. One, CJ harassed us to know when to do it, along with Elise. So peer pressure and polite bullying does work. The other thing too is that, like I said, this wasn't planned. This wasn't on our slate for 2022. We had our, I think, 10 titles locked in, and we were very much firmly set on, like, this is what we can do. We can do this well. Pushing it past that may overload us, because it's Chris and me. But the anthology, what we want to do with it isn't so much about we want to put this title out because we want to make a whole bunch of money for ourselves on it. This is something where we heavily skewed the compensation to the creators. I think we had it in the submission form that right, with this 90% of the profits going to the creative teams, right? Band of Bards is keeping 10% of the profit. So we're basically covering costs and taking, a very small bit of profit for ourselves, because we're putting a lot of work into it before even starting to make the book. But really, the big upside from the static for us as a publisher is that, one, it's giving us an opportunity to work with 16 more teams of creators, right? That's for us, that's more than the first full year's worth of work, right? We're putting out 10 other titles in our first year. So we've more than, that's 150% more creative teams that we're getting to work with by just adding one more title. And that's cool, right? Because for us, one of the big things, like I've said over and over again, is we need to get out there. We need to establish relationships, and we need to we need to prove that we are a good publisher to come and work with. We want people to, want to build our reputation first before trying to go out and do a million different titles. Can't put the cart before the horse. You have to be, you have to set a very good reputation for yourself when you're diving into this industry. We saw, not to name the other presses, but we certainly saw a couple of small other indie presses really have their entire reputation and brand get tanked once some creators felt confident enough to start talking about their experiences with them. That right there is always like that cautionary tale, I guess, to say. So for us, From the Static was an effort to build the brand and draw more fans into Band of Bards. So if we get that benefit out of this title, we're more than happy to give, a vast majority of the profits to the creators. It's a neat twist, I guess, on doing anthologies. I don't know. I really don't have a giant list of other anthologies and how they broke down compensation, things like that, and their goals for the anthologies. So I just know what we're doing. I have confidence in what we're doing and that we have a smart approach. And, until someone tells me I'm a big fucking idiot and I don't know what I'm doing, I'll continue to believe that we're doing at least most things in a smart way. All right, I rambled there, and there's some more comments. All right, look at that. See? I'm not that dumb. I'm so glad that Matt makes a lot of comments. I have something to throw up there while I want to get a sip of definitely, that's always a balancing act. you certainly need to bring in enough working capital to keep the other stories flowing, right? If you cut yourself too short, you might get one issue out, but then you're not going to be able to continue to operate, right? And that's a big balancing act. I think a lot of times that can maybe be underappreciated in the world of indie comics, right? The big two, they have no issues with working capital and cash flow. Most other small presses, and I'm sure it's probably an issue for even your really the other indies that are quote unquote doing well, right? That are in that range of top 10 publishers. They, it's a cash heavy industry, and it's a constant cash flow problem of, you have a product that takes 4 to 6 months of lead time to go from creating to in the hands of a customer, sometimes longer, right? Something being slated a year out, since certainly not unheard of, or even longer. So to be able to have the money up front to pay for a lot of this stuff when you aren't going to realize any kind of return for half a year on it, it's not easy. Chris and I are not trust fund babies. We don't come from any kind of inherited wealth. We're doing this with a lot of hard work and a lot of support from fantastic people. So, I don't even know. Train of thought gone. Matt's got another question. Thank God. Ultimate goal for Band of Bards. We've talked about how, for one of the longer term goals, I don't know if we have an ultimate goal, but longer term goals, I'm stupid. Let me keep this up. Let me keep that question up as I talk. We've talked about how we want to go and transition from being a regular LLC to a benefit corporation, which Kickstarter has constantly highlighted how they're a benefit corporation. If anybody's not familiar with how all that works, you may be familiar with the term B Corp. Those are actually separate things. So when you, and this is super geeky stuff now. So as you incorporate a company in any state, each state's going to have their different requirements for what qualify you for what. In New York State, there are very certain specifications you have to meet in order to be a benefit corporation. You have to be able to continually, year after year, hit those requirements, which is why we didn't immediately register as a benefit corporation. It would be very difficult to come up on a 1 year and be able to say we've hit your requirements. People familiar with B Corps, you might know like Patagonia. Is it Bob's Shoes? That company that for every pair of shoes that they sell, they donate a pair, right? Those are a couple of like more well-known B Corps. Now, to be a B Corp and have that certification, it's through like another independent third-party nonprofit that comes in and has their own set of guidelines that you have to meet to get their B Corp branding, more or less. So that's a little bit separate from actually being. You could be a benefit corporation as you are registered in your state and not be a B Corp, with that distinction. Super geeky stuff, like I said. Probably don't want to put anybody else to sleep talking about it like that. But the reason we want to be that benefit corp is that legally, companies are responsible to their shareholders and to do everything in their shareholders' benefit. Whether you're publicly traded or private, it doesn't matter. The people who own a share of the owners. So like me and Chris are the two owners. Would be like in the eyes of the law the shareholders. So the company would have to do things to the benefit of us. To being a benefit corporation, it gives you basically like the legal coverage to, as a company, go out and do things that don't necessarily benefit the shareholders, which is why like Patagonia will donate so much money or do a lot of things that are for public good. So, right, we're comics doing good. That's the whole movement that we're trying to build and push more into a wider, more of a mainstream, I guess. I don't know how you want to categorize it, but you know, we want this to catch on. We want more people to have that same sort of ethos that comics is community. We should all be in here not so much in competition with each other to cut each other down, but to prop each other up. And to live that ethos in a very material, concrete way as a company means we would organize as a benefit corporation, because that's quite literally putting your money where your mouth is, right? And to have that distinction gives us the legal framework to be able to do that. Very long answer there. Elise asking, cons, hopefully, pandemic withstanding, we certainly want to get to at least a few cons this year. I applied for a small, like, one day I'm sorry. I'm hitting my it's been a long couple of days. Yeah, so there's a Rochester. Oh, there's an event in Rochester coming up that we've applied for. I'm trying to think of, like, the initials are Rice. Rochester something in Comics Expo. That's gonna bug me now. But so we've got one hopefully this spring that we'll be going to just up the road in Rochester. It's a small one-day affair, but it's really cool. Dave Chisholm's gone to that, and if you know, his endorsement's good enough for me. So I'd like to get there and do that. There are a few cons right around here in Buffalo. Oddly enough, the Buffalo Comic Con is put on by one local store, and they generally don't really invite a whole lot of other local businesses and stuff to it. Dan, thank you. Rochester Indie Comics Expo, thank you. Hopefully we're at Rice this year. That'll be very fun. So yeah, so there's Buffalo Comic Con, there's Nickel City Comic Con. So it's weird that we got two cons in Buffalo. Buffalo is really a small town when it comes down to it in a lot of ways. So the two competing cons that we've got there are essentially like local businesses with their egos trying to compete against each other. There's Niagara Falls Comic Con, which is on the Canadian side of the falls. There's, obviously Toronto's only a couple hours away. So exciting. There's a lot of opportunity, and it's mostly pandemic withstanding. Would love to get down to Pittsburgh as well. Max Majernik, the writer of Prospects, which has just gone out, and most packages have been delivered as far as I can tell from our tracking. He's in Pittsburgh, so that'd be nice. Have the local connection there and go out to. Start modest, start with those, and hopefully within the next few years we're doing a lot more cons. Great question. Distribution plan. Okay, this will be my transition to talk about Targets, our first campaign on Zoop, coming to you on March 1st. Why is this a really good transition to talk about from going from the stack to Targets? Well, obviously with the distribution within America, right? Lunar, Diamond, those are the ones you need to get linked up with. Neat thing with From the Static is that that's a little bit larger of a book, which we could also list through Ingram. So those are the three sources that we're looking at, and what we're doing with Final Gamble, which a little update on that. Again, delayed at the printer, like most people are dealing with. So hopefully in the next week or two, that one is getting printed and then finally shipped off to us. So with Final Gamble and Prospects, when you submit those to the distributors, you do need to send a physical copy in with it. You can't just send the digits and the other materials that they ask for. Funny thing, Diamond took down a lot of their information about how to send in comics to them to be listed in previews. Luckily, I'd saved a PDF of it quite some time ago. But essentially what Diamond asks for, and this is a lot for Lunar too, is physical copy of the comic, your marketing plan, and they really don't give a whole lot of guidelines on that. So, you take your best stab at, like, all right, marketing plan. This is the genre it falls into. These are the target demographics. These are who it would appeal to with comp titles, and how many copies we expect to sell. Very rough guidelines right there. So all of the books that we make, once we get the physicals, will be going to distributors. Flip side of it, international shipping and distribution is always a gigantic pain that nobody's ever satisfied with. We're trying something out with the Target's Zoop, and that instead of having shipping charges dependent on your country, we're taking Zoop's charges that they have, and for anybody unfamiliar with that, they have like a pre-figured out weight-based chart. So as you're going into like a Zoop campaign, and you select initially like a tier that you want, and then you can get other individual add-on items, kind of like an a la carte menu, or you can get a bundle added on, a bunch of stuff, and Zoop will automatically calculate the total weight of everything you select and charge appropriate shipping based on that. So we'll be using the domestic US shipping chart for all orders: Canada, UK, EU countries, Australia, New Zealand. They're going to pay domestic US shipping. How can we do that? What we're trying here is, if anybody knows of Buy Small Press, is anybody's familiar with them, and if I had two brain cells stored together, I would have some links prepared. Let me get some of those. But I don't want to knock Bob down. Alright, let me get a link. So Buy Small Press is a company in the UK. They've done, historically they have done crowdfunding fulfillment, but they also have, think of it as like an Amazon strictly for comics. They have their own online marketplace where you can set up your own store, kind of like how third-party sellers are on Amazon, or you can just list your products with them to just be on their store. There's some different administrative benefits to that and some different tier fee structures for each of those options. To keep it short though, they will then do all the order fulfillment on international orders. Did a lot of crunching of shipping charts between their shipping chart, the one for Zoop, and just what we typically do ourselves. And a lot of ounces to grams conversion, lots of US dollars to British pounds conversions. But what it comes out to is that more or less the chart prices what we would charge for domestic shipping within the US would also cover the charges needed to be collected to cover the shipping of our products via Buy Small Press from the UK out to the UK, EU, Australia, New Zealand, Canada. So what we'll need to do is have an additional print run say through Mixum UK, that will be sent from that printer in the UK to Buy Small Press, stored at Buy Small Press's facility. They do the Kickstarter fulfillment, and then further on, fulfillment of any kind of international orders on our behalf. That way, we're able to charge shipping rates of, $5 to $12 essentially, rather than, Christ, I think we had to charge like $25 for shipping to Australia, and it's still we still ate quite a bit on shipping to Australia, even after charging $25 of shipping. So our hope is that this is going to expand our fan base to international markets a lot more, and obviously just make it a lot more affordable for fans, 10 minutes across the freaking border from us in Canada, or fans in the UK, because we have creators in the UK that we're working with that we want to be able to sell and distribute. Buy Small Press will actually be able to distribute directly to retailers in the UK and the EU for us as well. So there's a lot of upside to this. I don't want to go and tell everybody else to rush and do it. Not because I'm not trying to hide a secret. I just told you all what we're doing. But I want to make sure that this is going to work out the way that I have figured it in my head, and I've had people at Zoop double checking my math and my plan, and folks at Buy Small Press double checking me. Chris was double checking me, like a little neurotic here on it, but I'm 99% confident that I figured out a way for us to be able to sell outside of the U.S. with only charging U.S. shipping rates. So, hey, if you're in Europe, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, which I love Kiwis. I absolutely love New Zealand. Played lots of rugby with Kiwis. Please buy our comics. It'll be the most affordable comic from the United States that you'll ever get. So that's a lot on the shipping and distribution question. You'll never get Rob, you're long-winded. I think I'm probably more long-winded. Goodreads. Brain's not working on that one right now, Alyssa. I'm sorry. And for digital comics, we are on Global Comics, and I set up an account for us yesterday at Drive-Thru Comics. They got talked about a bit more yesterday after all the Comixology fallout. So that's neat. Big weekend plans for me is to get Prospects #1 up and going on Global Comics, and then obviously get Final Gamble and Prospects up on Drive-Thru Comics as well. Now, the neat thing with those is that, again, Global Comics has like a dynamic reader view, where I can kind of like design the comics to guide the reader through each page and panel. Whereas Drive-Thru Comics will be a little bit more of a traditional single page, double page format. Bob, sorry. So the two websites actually do give a little bit of differentiation in the product offered, which is always good, right? You don't want to have a lot of duplication of effort and redundancy. So it's nice to be able to say that there actually is a purpose to having our digital comics offered on both. And obviously they're for sale through bandobards.com as well. Just going through some of these comments. Yeah. Shipping's always a pain in the backside. Hard thing to figure out, so that's why I'm very happy to share what we learn with everybody else, because we're all in this together, right? Like, if you sell a comic, it isn't taking business away from me. So I hope you sell lots of comics too. If I can figure out a way to share some information that helps other people's out, I'm glad to do that. No, staying quiet. Like I said, I'd be happy to share this plan over and over again. I just want to have a little bit of actual validation of it by running through a few times with starting with Target's Zoop. March 1st. And Elise reminded me that Goodreads is a book rating website. Yes, please tell me about it, because I'm just not familiar enough with it. Goodreads. Alright. So yeah, Targets. Targets is coming to Zoop on March 1st. Let me take a bite of pastry first. I need to recharge. Bear Claw, infinitely better than me licking a microphone. Way better. Alright. Zoop. Zoop, 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 zoop. There you are. Let me grab that link, because I probably should promote things that we are doing. Alright. There is the link, the pre-launch page of Targets. Let's show the comments. Alright. So, Zoop's still kind of new. Exciting thing. Let me look at my calendar here to get these dates right. Oh, Bob goes down. Alright. March 11th, Brittany Matter, who will be running her own Zoop, will be on with Ryan and crew. So we'll have two folks in the thick of things with the Zoop campaigns to talk about it on the Bardcast. And on March 18th, Jordan, Plosky, the CEO of Zoop, will be joining me. We'll be able to talk about, from the publisher's perspective, how Zoop is, what it's like using, and we'll have the CEO to be on and answer a lot of questions. There's a lot of cool stuff with Zoop. Let me get Bob. Sorry, Bob. Lots of stuff to talk about with Zoop, that's for sure. So, I'm really glad that Jordan will be coming on and answering questions, be able to pick his brain. And one of the, I think we said it before, but it bears repeating, because very few people tune in every week and listen to me. You can alter so many different things even after you launch a Zoop campaign, right? It's a smaller platform, so people might be scared away from, less people scrolling through randomly finding your comic and backing it. But the upside of the smaller platform is that you are able to have a little bit more, hesitant to say agile or adaptive, because I hate buzzwords, but they are more applicable in these cases right here, right? You can change your Zoop campaign quite a bit on the fly. Add new items, drop prices, do flash sales, extend the length of the campaign. You can change your funding goal. The folks at Zoop are extremely receptive, and their goal is to make sure you're successful, and they're much more committed to ensuring your success. That's obviously going to get our attention, and has us excited to launch Targets onto Zoop. So, exactly. I fucking hate those buzzwords. Hate it. But adaptive and agile is probably the best way I can describe a lot of the Zoop. Unfortunately, when you want to use those words in a very genuine way, they've been ruined by all the stupid bros. Alright. I'm really tired. Who has questions? Alright. Last little bit that I can say about Targets and Zoop. The Targets team, Ryan D, Desi, Jerome, they're making something that is, it's hard to say one of a kind, right? You always have a little bit of doubt in the back of your mind. Could something really be one of a kind? It certainly pushes that boundary. It's a very unique story. It's a spy thriller, and you're going to get a lot of the things you would expect from a spy thriller. Cool gadgets, very little espionage takes, fantastic action scenes. It's got a lot of hyper-violence in it. Hyper-violence for the sake of examining that violence. Where it kind of goes in a different direction in terms of spy thrillers is you're looking at something that wants to turn some of the traditional tropes on their heads, right? You're going to open up, you're going to read it and think that you know who the main characters are, who your main protagonist is, and how this story is going to go. And when you get to the last page, everything is going to get turned upside down on you, and you're not going to know what to expect out of issue number 2. Ryan's done a very good job of crafting the story to have some really interesting details, some little things that add a lot more depth to the story than just a bunch of run around, shoot 'em up action. And the ending, well, what can I say about it that doesn't spoil anything? The ending will certainly make you want to pick up issue 2. It'll make you want to have issue 2 right away. So, very excited for that. That's a question. Are you trying to establish core identity for the brand? What types of books? We have a very broad approach, right? We have our mission. We want to expand on the representation. Representation is the most important thing with our body of work. The diversity within comics and inclusion need to, at an indie level, it's pretty good, right? Like, we are a very welcoming community for the most part, except for that one group of people. But there's still hot button issues, right? A lot of things at the bigger names, publishers and that, it's still that superficial bit of effort on increasing the diversity in the comics game. So that's our core, right? That's our mission. That's what we're here to do, and we want to push those fields forward. We want to advance those fields, both in the stories that we're telling and in the teams we're working with. And there's an interesting, I guess you could go down a rabbit hole on which is more important, telling stories that are more inclusive and push the diversity, or the teams. Right? When you're hiring creators of a more diverse background, or just taking on their books and publishing them, either gosh, I'm really rambling now because I'm tired. When you're working with creators that are more diverse, you're going to get stories that are more diverse, right? Because everybody writes what they know. That's why for so long in comics, all the comics and the superheroes were white dudes, because the people creating the comics were white dudes. All right, you're always right what you know. So I would say building our relationship, building our reputation, building relationships with diverse creators, folks from all different backgrounds, all different experiences in life, working with them and showing that they can trust us to in a very genuine and authentic way tell their stories and elevate their stories to a larger audience. As long as we're working with good people, we're going to have good stories, and we're going to see, the body of work that we put out, our own, library will be what we want it to be, right? I think sometimes when it comes to branding, people get a little bit too up their own asses, right? I despise when people talk about how individuals need to create their own brands, right? People need to have a personality, not a brand, right? And you can look at companies and the way that they build a brand as either very methodical and very business school like, or maybe it's a bit more like the company wants to have a personality. And there's a balance to that too, right? If you're just going out being a personality, can sometimes be taken as not so serious as a company, and that starts to, there's a little bit of benefit to that because you feel more relatable, more reachable, but you do need to be serious as a company. Think of the Steakums Twitter account, and which is one of the most ridiculous things on Twitter, and I love it. But the way that they approached it, Wendy's Twitter, right? That was always good how they would harass others. Fast food chains. Right, that's where tools like social media can be used to build the personality of the company more so than the brand. And again, now I'm getting on my own ass too on that. So okay, I really pushing it. Yeah. What can I say? From the static, we'll hear more about it later in the year, in spring and summer. We'll be hearing about each of the individual titles. Targets is coming to Zoop on March 1st. Go to the pre-launch link, get notified. If you haven't set up a Zoop account yet, it's super easy. If you already have a Google account, you can log in with that. It is literally 2 clicks and 3 seconds, right? And you have an account. The way the platform works, when you go to a campaign, there's tiers that you would pick, and there's a lot of add-on items and bundles that you would pick after your main tier. It works a lot more like a traditional e-commerce site where you're picking a bunch of item, like a core item basically with your tier, and then items a la carte. So you cash out at the end is when you would put in credit card information, all that kind of stuff, which means setting up the account, it's so simple. It's easy. It should not be a barrier for anybody deciding to jump onto Zoop and back a comic. We're not casting Kickstarter off as a pariah. We're making a very calculated decision to, instead of further investing our time and effort onto one platform that we're not sure what's going to happen with it, we're going to, since we have the benefit of being a younger company, we're going to go a little bit harder onto Zoop and see what we can build through that platform. Hopefully as it grows, we grow. Again, that's that whole concept of comics doing good. We want to build up everybody. Rising tides, right? Rising tide will lift all of us. We're trying to be... We're not trying to. We are optimistic people about that. Genuinely believe that you elevate the entire industry, you're going to bring everybody else up. So tired. All right. Unless there are any last minute questions, I'm going to say thank you for joining in tonight and listening to me ramble and look pathetic. Rough day. All right. Well, with that, I think I'm going to go have a couple beers and watch Peacemaker. I wonder how it ends. I don't know. Peace.